So in this video I'm going to talk through how we go about adding tone in a directional and informed manner. I'm adding tone to my skull here, skull drawing, which I've drawn out in a nice light thin outline, and I'm starting to add just a simple layer using the side of my pencil of a fairly light tone. I'm working into some of the areas, and as you can see I'm moving my sketchbook around so that I'm adding tone in a directional manner around the contours of the face. Now what I'm doing is I'm starting to layer up in some of the areas that I want to be darker tones, again using the side of my pencil, applying more pressure, but changing that at times to just use the nib of the pencil to create a more pinpointed, accurate area of darker tone. The higher up your pencil is, the more of a darker pressure, the more of a darker tone. Now what I'm doing is I'm starting to work into the eye socket. As we know, the eye socket is going to be extremely dark, so you can see the amount of layers that I'm having to apply over and over again in that area, using the nib of the pencil. Again, just pressure around, and again I'm moving my sketchbook around and around, adding tone in a directional curved manner to try and create the same illusion of the curved eye socket. You'll see in a second that what I'm doing is I'm leaving some areas of light tones to create that image and that feel of depth and form with the eye socket. The eye tones just show a couple of areas where the light just hits it and then leaves it a little bit brighter, a little bit lighter. But mainly you want to be adding loads and loads of layers of tone over and over again, just to build up that sense of real dark areas and darker tones. Now I'm working back in the top area, smoothing out my outline with some darker tones and trying to remove that original pencil outline. Pause the video here and have a go at it yourself, trying to follow the instructions so far, just working in a small area of the skull. In the next part of the video I'm going to talk about how we can blend those tones together to create a nice gradual transition between our three basic tones. Now the first thing you'll note is that I'm not using my finger to blend this together. Our skin has some natural oils in there, and when we use our finger, what that does is it leaves a few little bits of that natural oil in the picture, and what it can end up doing is it can end up just smoothing everything out, so you lose those three tones and it just becomes a bit of a washed out grey. So what I use is those little cotton buds, or you could even use just a little bit of a tissue. And then what you want to do is just work into an area very softly, again in a directional manner, just creating that smoothed out effect. Trying not to smooth over the edges or over the corners. You can see me working in the eye socket there, just creating in the eye socket. And the beauty of using that cotton bud means that it leaves a lot of the pencil on the actual cotton bud, and you can use that to work into the darker areas. Be careful not to use it into the areas you want to remain light, because it will add more darker pencil tones to the areas that you apply it to. Pause the video here and have a go at it yourself, trying to follow the instructions so far, just working in a small area of the skull. Okay, so now we come to a more tricky area, which is the bridge of the nose, and we know that that's got a slightly concave feel to it. And as you can see, the way I'm applying that lighter tone first is almost as diagonal lines either side of the nose, down onto the cheekbones, and now what I'm doing is I'm layering over the top in a curved line over the top of the bridge of the nose. You can see me now adding a little bit more detail using the nib of the pen and those darker tones, just to add a couple of those little cracks and those little darker areas. And now what I'm doing is I'm really coming down on the right hand side of the bridge of the nose, applying quite a lot of pressure but still using the side of the pencil, not the nib. So I'm applying quite a lot of pressure, which will build up the tones. but you can see that it's almost like an S shape that I've applied that tone coming down the side of the nose. The reason I've done that is that will enhance the contours of the shape of the skull and will ultimately improve the more realistic and use of form. In this next part now, I'm starting to add the darker tones similar to the eye socket, but I'm adding those darker, real harsh dark tones in the gap where the nose bone would be. So we know this is a hollow area, and again just layering that over, still using that contoured line and leaving the couple of those little areas there of highlights, and then I'm blending that out a little bit using some of those mid and softer tones, trying my best not to leave any dark lines. Once I've done that, what I'll do is I'll go back in again with the cotton bud and just start to blend out some of those harsher lines that they may have left, just to make sure, ensuring that if I do use the cotton bud in those darker areas, I don't then go and apply the same cotton bud into some of the areas that I want to keep light. And finally, in this small section here, you can see me now coming round onto the opposite cheekbone, which is going to be darker because that's where the light is not hitting. And you can see me adding those lines, those concave lines, to where I want to add the real dark tones. And I'm building over the top of that now with a mid-tone, which in turn will make those lines that I've put in first a little bit darker. And again, now just going in and enhancing the real dark tones, really looking to improve the feel of form, but also as well you'll notice that they're all purposeful, it's all directional, it's all going in a certain way to create the 3D effect of that right cheekbone. Pause the video here and have a go at it yourself, trying to follow the instructions so far, just working in a small area of the skull. So the last little bit that I wanted to show you on here was this area, a large area at the top, which would be the kind of forehead area. It's a large area of mid and light tones, so we're not adding too much harsh shadow, but also you can see it's where the flowers touch as well. Now you can see that I'm building up layers of quite light tone using the side of my pencil. They're in a curved way to create that kind of curved area in the forehead. So you can see that to the left of centre they curve in almost a C shape, and to the right of centre they're almost in a backward C, leaving a little area in the centre of the forehead of highlights. Now what you can see is that I'm going around the edges where the flowers meet the skull, and I'm just adding some harsh shadows in those areas, just where the flowers would be resting on top of the skull, and I'm building up a lot of darker areas using the nib of the pencil and then also the side of the pencil to create those darker tones. But the whole time I'm blending out from those darker tones. You can see there that I've just added a tissue underneath my hand. The reason for doing that is that when you're working in this much pencil tone, you can end up with quite a dark side to your hand. Putting a little bit of tissue underneath means that it doesn't get all smudged all over the rest of the paper and all over the rest of your work. Just keeps everything nice and neat and tidy. So I'm going to go round now, and I'm going to, you'll see that I'm just going to add various levels of dark tone. Now I'm not going to add the same level of dark tone. I'm now over the left hand side of the skull, which as we know is where the light is hitting it. So it's going to be a little bit lighter on that side than it would be on the right side. So I'm not going to apply as much pressure as I did on the right hand side. And what you can start to see now is that it starts to give that real 3D effect. Pause the video here and have a go at it yourself, trying to follow the instructions so far, just working in a small area of the skull. So once you've got most of those mid, light and dark tones in, you can just use that cotton bud again. Just see that I'm using it in some of those darker areas to smooth out some of my pencil lines. But the main important thing is that you use your pencil first before you start to do any kind of blending. It's really important that you know how to blend as much as possible using just your pencil before you start smoothing. Try and avoid going over the lines, and make sure that even when you're using a cotton bud, you're still doing it in an informed and directional manner. Hope that's been useful, guys. Good luck with your tonal skulls.